But here we are, another episode of Stewarts Soundbites, and I'm absolutely delighted today because I've got Jonathan France with me, and Jonathan's a chartered architectural professional and the managing director of France and Associates, which is a practice full of lots of different architectural professionals. And Jonathan also acts as an expert witness in accommodation needs for cases involving PI and Cloneg. So what we're going to talk about today is so topical at the moment, and has been in the news recently, as Jonathan told me this morning. So hopefully it'll be something really interesting for everybody today. So Jonathan, thank you and welcome.
Thanks for having me.
No, it's a pleasure. And today is a bit different. We're going to talk about how finding and adapting properties for catastrophically injured clients in a post-COVID world has changed. So I'm just going to dive in and ask you, first of all, what are the kind of key problems that individuals and rehab professionals are coming up against at the moment in terms of finding properties that are suitable for adaptations since COVID, and really have you got a feeling as to how the market has changed?
Yes, well, I think first thing is to say it was already a massive challenge to find suitable housing anyway. There's certainly a lack of it, and I think there's also a lack of houses generally that would attract or attach themselves to the needs of the client. So that's already a challenge, and the additional challenges that we're now facing, which everyone's facing, is that it's more difficult to secure properties. What we've seen is properties that are suitable are tending to go for higher than the asking price. In some cases, clients of ours have got into a bit of a bidding war with somebody else who's interested in the same property. In other cases, there's been occasions where vendors have had cold feet. So those are the scenarios. So what we're finding is that the properties are staying less on the market to the point where we can secure the property, but then it's taking longer to actually purchase the property. So the completion process is taking much longer, which can sometimes be at an advantage to the client, because obviously there's various reports and various things that they need to do as exercises to make sure it's, from a due diligence perspective, the right property to purchase.
Yeah. So
lots of challenges, but we're all in it, unfortunately, together.
Well, that's it. And it just sounds, I mean, everybody knows that moving home is just, oh, it's diabolic. It makes me anxious even thinking about when I last moved home. But for somebody who's been through so much already and sustained catastrophic injuries, to find themselves in the middle of a bidding war or something like that is just hugely stressful, isn't it? I mean, it's just unbelievable. And have you found that, are there fewer properties on, is that a thing, Jonathan? There are fewer properties becoming available, or actually has there been a massive boom since we've got the reliefs in, haven't we, on the stamp duty?
Yeah, I think there's two sides to it. I think in some cases at times there appears to be more properties because vendors are seeing an opportunity. It's a seller's market at the moment, so it's a good time to sell. But for the reasons that I've explained before, is that they're on the market for a much shorter time, so they get snapped up quickly. In other cases, especially with the rental properties, we found that those properties are harder to get hold of. In some cases, the landlords we've spoken to are more interested in selling the property because of the changes to landlord legislation. And again, for that same reason, it's a good time to sell. So that's presented another additional challenge for claimants. Of course, the one is being able to visit it, because at times being able to visit the properties themselves before you're committing to buying your forever home, when you can't due to your own vulnerability, or you can't because the vendor's not accepting visits. Those are all been severe challenges during the COVID time, but it has recently just got a little bit better.
Yeah, I'm sure as restrictions are lifting.
Yes, we hope so anyway.
Yeah. Oh, fingers crossed. So in terms of the timescales, you said, and the process itself is taking long, but there's tight timescales in terms of snapping up properties.
Yeah.
Is that naturally disadvantageous for the type of clients that we work with, do you think? Because I mean, in some cases you've got rehab team and case managers going to visit properties.
Yeah, in some cases it can be to your client's advantage, really, especially where there's a number of visits required. So obviously the purchase process can be ongoing whilst those reports can be put in place. But there's the other side of things that if, for instance, if the interim funding is required because the case hasn't settled, in some cases we've seen vendors ask the question directly whether or not funding is in place and chosen to go down the direction where they know that the purchaser can complete on the property sooner. So that has been in some cases a disadvantage, but you would like to think with the length of the process that it can actually be an advantage or used to your client's advantage.
Okay. I'm thinking kind of going back to earlier stages, Jonathan, thinking about the challenges for people. I mean, what have been the challenges for people who are being treated in hospital and they're transitioning to a home environment, whether that's rented accommodation or privately owned accommodation? Have those challenges been different, and will they continue to be different?
I don't know if they'll continue to be different. One would like to think as things are easing that it will be a little bit easier, because in addition to all the challenges a client has faced whilst being in hospital, they've obviously been isolated from their family whilst being in hospital because family have been able to make a visit. But then the person, when moving into their original home or a rented home out of hospital, have actually felt quite isolated in comparison to being in hospital, because in the hospital you might get visits from nurses and therapists and some regular human contact and conversations of general chit chat. But what we found, especially in a couple of clients of ours, is that they've ended up feeling very isolated once they've moved back home after their hospital stay. So that's not been great, and one would like to think that that might improve once lockdown restrictions ease. Of course, it's never an ideal scenario moving back into a property that isn't fully suitable, because that in itself is isolating if you're restricted to only a number of rooms of your home.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose there's been, in a lot of cases, hospitals have been so busy, and it's been wanting to get people out of hospital as quickly as possible.
Absolutely, yeah.
Which is another stressful aspect of all of this. What about adaptations then? John, this is kind of what I alluded to at the beginning, saying that there's been a bit of this in the press recently, but we all know it's been an absolute nightmare trying to get contractors and building materials throughout the pandemic. Is that ongoing, and is that likely to have any significant knock-on delays for the type of clients that we deal with?
I think at the moment, most people in the profession, certainly the ones I've spoken to, and certainly building contractors, are all of the opinion that it's probably going to get worse before it gets better, unfortunately. I think earlier in the pandemic, what we were seeing was the difficulty of the logistical side of things, of working inside a property where someone's vulnerable, obviously protecting the person who lives there, but protecting the tradesman as well. So at times, the length of works have lengthened, they've taken longer because a tradesperson has either been tested positive, or he's had to isolate, or she has had to isolate for whatever reason. So those have been those challenges. And then, of course, the ones that are most recent now is the material shortages. It's quite a timely discussion, really, because in the Sunday Times just this Sunday, it spoke about a difficult challenge ahead with regards to get materials into the country because of the lack of shipping containers. And in the BBC article, it mentioned something similar. Both articles summarise that there's going to be an increase in cost because of the increase in demand. And what we've seen so far is it's frustrating because it's not a consistent increase in certain materials. Sometimes what we've seen is independent merchants, the price for instance, plaster has gone up one week and gone down the next due to a supply and demand. And I think that's a change to the industry, which it's countrywide. It's not just for the industry with regards to adapting houses for individuals like the ones we work with. It's going to affect everybody. And I think the main factors I've seen is that the industry's predominantly been a just-in-time industry where there's always been a good supply of materials, and it's come with next day or the following day delivery. But now we're seeing delivery time stretched to as long as 16 weeks for items that would arrive normally a lot quicker. And on top of those sort of standard national shortages that we've also seen localized shortages. I know in one area we saw a shortage of skips, that the skip company couldn't pick up a skip for 4 weeks rather than the same week. So that's the difficulty, is that it's different in each area of the country, that there's added stresses on top of national shortages. So I could go on with this.
I know.
It's
there's so much to it, Jonathan, and it's an important point, I guess, for rehab teams to think in terms of preparing their clients and liaising with everyone in terms of timescales, and also for us in my job and in your job as an expert, Jonathan, to bear in mind the costs implications of these things as well. That's ever so important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a big thing at the moment, because most contractors will be held to what is essentially a fixed price. They will price their materials, they price their labor, but contractors will be uneasy to commit themselves to a contract where there's an unknown factor around whether or not the materials are going to go up, because most building contracts, or a lot of building contracts, don't accommodate materials fluctuating or increasing in price. And of course, the same thing, absolutely what you've said there, you've got to manage your client's expectations, because it could cost more and it will likely take longer than expected.
Yeah. And are these, all of this, I mean, there are different reasons. COVID's one precipitating factor. And I just wonder, what do you think about the kind of long-term implications and what the long-term repercussions are for the type of clients we work with? Is this going to be an ongoing situation, or, I mean, the market changes all the time, I suppose.
Yeah. I think it will probably remain the same for some time. Because I think the reasons why we're seeing these material shortages is not just the UK with regards to Brexit. When I've spoken to other professionals in other countries, they're seeing the same issues. So it's a worldwide problem. And how long that takes to fix, I don't know. What I can say is that in our European counterparts, they've never had a just-in-time process with regards to purchasing materials. They've always worked on the basis that you have to order it within a good amount of time so that it arrives when you require it on site. And I think that's more likely the direction that most builders will go, that they'll either buy things in bulk or they'll order it within a reasonable time frame so that it arrives, and hopefully that will reduce the stress. But
yeah,
at the moment, yeah,
I think Amazon Prime's to blame largely for this demand, because people just know that things are going to turn up the next day, and you get used to it, don't you? Next day delivery and same day delivery in some cases, and there's an expectation that everything happens really quickly. And for our clients, where time really is an issue, it's important to factor in. And finally, Jonathan, I am a big fan of top tips. So I was wondering if you have any top tips for rehab professionals who might be watching today when they are searching for properties, rental or purchase for their clients.
Yeah. Well, there's a long list of top tips, but I would suggest at the point of purchasing a property is to do as much research about the property as possible. It may come at a cost. So reports such as coal mine reports or planning history reports, all those sorts of things should be in place before the purchase of the property. And although it is a cost, it's worthwhile because it'll probably save a lot of issues further down the line. Yeah. So that's one top tip. With regards to building, I would probably say either don't do it and wait until it gets better, or get a contractor that is organised and a right fit.
Yeah, and know that you have to wait, and it's just going to take some time, I suppose. And as well, I suppose, just drawing on what you said earlier, Jonathan, those initial stages when properties are becoming available, to kind of to act quickly, I guess.
Absolutely.
Thank you ever so much, Jonathan. That's so interesting and so helpful. And things change so much, and it's just another aspect of these cases for us all to be mindful of. And I think you provided us there with some really, really useful information. So thank you ever so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for having me.